building before, if you need a bathroom, you go down and around this corner, and right after the kitchenette, take a left down that little hallway, and the bathrooms are there. So that's the first thing. If you ordered essential bee oils, I have them out here. If you're on the list, we will get those to you. If you want some, if after the people that ordered them are taken care of, you can get some oils. We use them in our feed to help for bee health, bee gut health. Keith Anderson is here. Can you hear me? You can't hear me. Keith Anderson's right here. We have just started doing beekeeping classifieds on our newsletter page. And so if you're interested, let us know. We just need current name, address. We don't want to support anybody getting scammed by Utah County beekeepers. So there are some rules that you have to follow for that. And Martin's going to cover about the minis.
Okay, so anybody who wants minis, I know there's people who ordered them. The gentleman will be here at 8 o'clock to pick them up today. We may have some extra if anybody's interested in them. I will also have, and I can get more of these, this is a center frame to create a mini frame out of a super, so if you're interested, let me know.
So for those who doesn't know what they're doing the minis for. Okay, so the minis, actually this is Al's neck of the woods since he invented all this, and he'll talk about. Anyway, the minis are a small frame about this big, and it started with Ron was in our group, but we put them in a medium box, so a honey box, and the bees build out the comb on those mini frames. We have a lady in Colorado who's a natural food fanatic, I'll use that word, enthusiast, that's a better word, enthusiast, and she can sell everything that we can produce.
You send the frame and all?
We send the frame and all.
Frame and all, they send the frame back and the box back.
Beth Conrad?
I don't know who it is.
Well, who? What?
Beth?
Beth?
Beth, I think
Beth
that's
Conrad.
real.
Yeah, she's a comb addict.
Yeah, so she takes that and she can sell it as fast as we can produce it. So it has been a good money maker for our beekeepers that want to fund their bees and fund their beehives. So yeah, hit Martin up on that. Swarms. So Gordon is not here tonight because his hive swarmed right before he was coming to this meeting. These days of high 60s, 70s, in the next few days we're going to see more and more. If you want to be on the swarm list, you need to be a club paying member, and then when you sign up on it, there's a spot that says I want to be on the swarm list. That goes to Jen over here, our secretary. She keeps the swarm list, goes to Mike, who is our swarm coordinator. Mike gets the phone calls. Mike goes down the list and calls people. You need to be prepared in your car, your gear, everything you want to collect a swarm, ready to go. And then when he calls you, go. Last year was a very light swarm year because we had such a late winter and it was cold. The year before, Chris can attest to this, everybody that was on the swarm list got bees. So if that's a way that you would like to increase your apiary and add bees at a lower cost, then I would say get on the swarm list.
Just a shout out, be so prepared. I picked up 2 swarms today.
Oh,
I got a call on one swarm and then I walked around that swarm for a little bit, found the apiary and found another swarm that apiary kicked off.
Wow. So I have been so busy this week and it's just giving me anxiety because I can't get into my hives till tomorrow. So hopefully girls wait off till tomorrow. Yeah. So anyway, it's my pleasure now that I'm going to introduce Albert Chubak. He's been a friend of Utah County Beekeepers for many years. He served in many positions and was a past president of UCBA. Actually, I think it was my 2nd year that you were president here. He's helped many new struggling beekeepers, me included, with his knowledge. I went up to his shop up in Salt Lake, and I'm amazed at his ability to work bees. You know, when I talk about the girl that wears her boots and her Daisy Dukes from Texas, that's Albert, although he doesn't wear Daisy Dukes. He is working his hive with no gear on. The bees are crawling all over his hands, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And Sam can attest, even getting a swarm, he got stung today, so.
Driving around in a white van full of bees like it's
Anyway, so he's a bee whisperer in my opinion. He's a dedicated bee enthusiast and a beekeeper since 1999. He's a resource to the beekeeping community both nationally and internationally. His passion for teaching and his comprehensive knowledge of bee behavior has made him an indispensable guide for both the novice and experienced beekeepers. He's contributed articles for various publications and has recently published a new book, Do You Speak Bees? And if you're interested, they've got some on the lobby there if you would like to purchase one. He's contributed, He's an inventor and created the mini urban beehive, which we kind of talked about, the mini frames. In 2017, he was awarded the prestigious P.F. Thurber Award for Inventiveness by the Western Agriculture, didn't say that right, Society for his Eco Bee Box and his publication Mini Urban Beehive. Albert is a member of the American Beekeeping Federation, Western Apiculture Society, Eastern Agricultural Society, and the Saskatoon Bee Club. In 2017, Albert was invited to teach beekeeping in Jordan, not our city in Utah, but across over in the Middle East. Albert left all of us in Utah and moved to his homeland of Canada, Saskatchewan, where he lives with his wife, and if I say this right, Camellia?
Yep.
Camellia. And their tabby cat, Tigger. His other hobbies include teaching, traveling, woodworking, and he's got scars to show for that, gardening, restoring early Volkswagen Beetles, and finding humor in life's moments. And we are glad to have you here with us. We're glad you made the trip to Utah and that you're sharing your time tonight with us. And let's give him a warm welcome. I might need you, Daniel. There you go.
Boo, can you hear me? Yes. It's been a long time since I've been here. 4 years, 50-some months since I was in Salt Lake. And when I left, I was a part of this club. I enjoyed it. The members here are great. I love this county. To start off, before I get into my little spiel, do you have any questions about that mini hive and the mini frames, or anything that is unrelated to what I'm about to talk about?
just never heard of it before till today, so a little bit of a rundown would be nice.
So the mini beehive started, it started because I came up with these brackets, and I made it so that I could make the hive any size I wanted. And what we had seen, Dave Bench and I from Murray, is that mating nukes were even smaller than what the mini beehive was. And where have the bees lived for the last 40 million years outside of modern beekeeping? Inside a dead tree about this big. So it made sense to us to have a smaller hive. It was such that I wanted to have honey that was not processed. I didn't want to have to use an extractor, and I didn't want the people that I was teaching initially to use an extractor, where they could just pull out a honey frame capped, take it into the house, and they could harvest it. And so essentially, the little mini beehive is a mating nuke, and that's how I start new beekeepers off and learn. They would start off with a few frames of open brood, where there was eggs and young larvae, and they're taught that in the next 3 to 5 days, they're to look for little queen cells. And because they're nurse bees, they're not aggressive, you can pull them out, you can look at them, you can touch them, you can blow on them, you can do anything, because they really aren't, they don't know anything about aggression yet. And so while they're learning and doing all that, they get to learn a whole bunch of stuff that beekeepers don't take the time to because they're either looking through their veil or there's too many bees and you don't want to open up all the way to where the brood is. So the mini beehive, that's how it started. It started off, I wanted comb honey, I didn't want to extract, and I wanted to teach beekeeping as simple as you could. And it started off where I was teaching kids. You know, you give them a few frames of eggs and larvae and nurse bees, take a picture and let me see the queen cell. Once I saw the queen cell, then I'd tell them, in a few days it's going to be capped, and it's going to stay capped for about 10, and you can watch it, just don't bump it. If it gets bumped, that queen cell will be dead. And then after the 10 days, it's going to go on a mating flight for up to 15 days, and then you're going to look for eggs. Once you look for the eggs and find them, name your queen. Give her her name, whatever you want. You created that queen. And so that's kind of how it was. And the mini hive was expandable. You could add boxes to it. You could subtract them. If all 4 boxes were full, because that's typically what I taught is 4 boxes. Once they're full, you could separate the 4 because they're going to have brood in most of the boxes. Whichever ones don't have a queen, it's a walk-away split. They'll go through that whole process all over again. The neatest part of it is that, let's say something happens and it doesn't create a queen cell, or you wreck the queen cell, or it's on an anthill, or it's in where the sprinklers are going every day, or your dog knocked it over, or you threw the frames on the, because you were being stung, you threw the frames with the queen cells and you destroyed it. You bring it back, I take 2 frames out, I put 2 frames back in, and you do it again. So the learning curve is that you get to be a beekeeper all season, rather than till your first failure and you wait till the next year till you get bees. I could make it so that I could supply them with frames and they could have bees all season long. Pretty cool. So that's the mini hive. And then from the mini hive, they moved to, we call that a Utah hive or a comb box. It's a medium that holds up to 30 frames. And the center bar, they build on, that's usually where the brood is, unless you use a queen excluder. And the frames are roughly 6 by 6. And the bees build on as they produce comb. You can harvest, so you don't need to have big stacks of hives. And then I wanted it so that the frames had side-to-side access, so that the bees could go and protect and watch everything that's in the hive. Whereas the tapered ones help you move them, but didn't help the bees go side to side. So all the ones that I have now have those. I have other ones, but that's amazing. And
so, do you put anything on the top to help?
I would start it with thin surplus, which you can get from Mad Lake. It's edible. It's called thin surplus. It's food grade beeswax foundation. And I would cut it in strips about the size of your finger and take one of those, wrap it up, put a wick in it, and use that for dripping candle wax on it. And that's how you bond the thin surplus strip to your frame. And then you know everything on it is food grade. You can eat everything that's there. Believe it or not, even the larva, and you can, my sister ate it, I can tell you, it's edible.
Did you make her?
That's a whole other story. So if you buy stuff that isn't thin surplus, it's beeswax, because there's stuff on Amazon and such, they won't tell you what the ingredients are in that wax. And a lot of wax that's out there has petroleum products in it. And you wouldn't eat it, you wouldn't ingest it. So this thin surplus is food grade beeswax, and it's really inexpensive. You can get a box for cheap, and it goes a long way. Instead of using a whole sheet, because when you use a whole sheet, you try to fasten it to the top, all the bees will hang on it, and then it'll pull it right off the top. So just put a little strip. They'll actually festoon off of the wood as well as from that plastic, and then they'll start building their comb, and then you know it's all good and fun. So I use the thin surplus. You can also drip candle wax, beeswax, along that edge, and they can build off of that, but sometimes that doesn't work. So thin surplus is great. But it's a fun way to use, especially when you're raising new queens. I absolutely thoroughly enjoy raising queens. My thing is, I don't eat honey very much anymore. I'm diabetic. I don't eat a lot of sweets, but I collect honeys from all over the world. I have honeys from everywhere, and it's just fascinating to taste them. So, and I have comb honey from a lot of different places. So, my thing is raising bees. I want to know what they're doing, why they're doing, how they're doing it. I want to find out how to make them healthy and strong, because honey is a byproduct of a successful colony. If they're not healthy, you're not going to get much out of them. But if they are, you can get tons. Any other questions about the minis? And there's lots of different ways to do the little minis. I did a whole publication on it. It's on my website, and I can send you free PDFs that you can have. You don't have to buy it anymore. And so it teaches you a lot of what I believe with the little small hives. Okay? Okay, let's get into this. So I left about 51 months ago, and initially my thought was that I was going to be gone for about 6 months. And it turned out that about a month or so after I left, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, Canada locked right down. You couldn't do anything. They were actually patrolling the streets to make sure people weren't congregating in homes. And so I was kind of stuck. And at that point, I was trying to think of what I could do. With my hives and all the stuff that I had done up until that point, I would go to conferences, I'd go to trade shows, I'd go all over the place. Because for the most part, when somebody sees a small hive, they think that it's a toy, they think it's a display, they don't think it's a real beehive. And so I had to be there to teach people. That's why I created that other magazine, because I needed people to learn without me having to teach every single person. And so because of the COVID, I didn't know what to do. I was working on cleaning some shops that were there, learning Volkswagen Beetle stuff. And so about that time is when I decided I was going to start writing a book. And the book initially was going to be a book for kids, and it was going to be a book about beekeeping for kids. If you go around, there's lots of different people that claim that they can teach kids how to be beekeepers, but even in the Boy Scouts of America, since the 20s, teaching beekeeping, they teach commercial beekeeping to these kids. And if you get a full-size hive, even a box full, that's about 80 pounds. How are kids supposed to lift that? How are they supposed to, even a frame is 8 to 10 pounds. And so my thing was that I didn't understand why they're trying to teach commercial beekeeping to kids. Well, because that's all they had. And so my thing was that I felt teaching kids with nukes and teaching them how to raise colonies was a better way. And so as I started my book, it was going to be the if-then principle. If you do this to a colony, this is going to be the result. And it's almost always exactly. So if you do something to that colony, there's going to be a result, either good or bad. Do you know what it is? A lot of times we inadvertently go into our hives, mess around and do stuff. Well, you just did something. What's going to be the result? Here's an example. If you have a top bar hive, middle of summer, you go and decide to inspect this top bar hive. And so you're pulling out the frames, you have to turn them this way so that the comb doesn't break, because it's really delicate. Well, then you put it all back together after inspecting it. Why did you inspect it? I'm not quite sure, but you inspected it and you put it all back together, and after that inspection, because you left honey stuff all over the place, it could have been wax, it could have been leaking honey, anything. The next time you come back to that honey or that hive, it's dead or gone. What happened? Well, if then you did something and you got the result, you created a robbing frenzy to that colony. And because you did that, you destroyed all the possibility of life in there. So that was my goal, to teach kids, if you start and do this, this is going to be the result. Now there can be some variation, but for the most part, that's what it is. But as I started going, I wanted to have show kids the different things that are happening in the hives. And I wanted them to be able to go to the hive, and instead of just saying, oh, there's bees flying back and forth, or this bee has pollen, I wanted to actually teach them what was actually happening in that amazing world inside that hive. Because there's so many incredible things that are going on. And so in Saskatoon, I ended up meeting a guy that used to draw for Mad and Crack magazine. I don't know, the older people here might remember it as a magazine that we kind of read when we were young. Really kind of unique. Well, he was drawing more dark stuff, goth type stuff. And I asked him if he could try drawing a bee for me. I gave him all the direction of what it was to be like and what had to be there and the difference in between a queen and a female bee and a drone. And he started creating all these images for me. And it got to the point that I was so excited with those images, I decided that I wasn't going to do the beekeeping book thing anymore. I was going to do a book, it's a biology book, essentially, for teens and up. But the issue, let's see how we're going to do this. There we go.
There you go.
And I'm not going to go through all of this. I got other stuff I want to talk about. But these were some of the things that I wanted people to think about. Why is this happening to my colony, and how do I fix it? For the most part, beekeepers will stand in front of their hive. They'll stand there and look at it and wonder what's happening. It could be bearding, it could be about to swarm, it could be about to abscond, it could be being robbed, you don't have a clue. And looking at things from the outside of the hive, there's only one teeny-weeny little picture of what's going on. You have to get in there to see what's going on. But then on the other hand, why are you wanting to know what's happening in the inner sanctum of the hive? Is it because you know something's wrong, or are you just interested? Because if you open it wide open and you start pulling out frames, you can kill or hurt your queen. So you have to have a reason to go into the middle of the hive. If you don't, you could be causing more things bad than others. If your season is already going and the bees are producing a lot of honey, that brood section is fine, it's awesome. A story I'll give, there's a lady in Cedar City that wrote me one day, sent me a text, and she said, Al, the bees hate your hives. And I'm like, what do you mean they hate my hives? She said, they just don't want to do anything, they hate it. And I'm like, I pull bees out of propane tanks, out of barbecues, out of walls, and they're like, how do they? They'll build it anywhere. And so I asked her more, so tell me what's going on. She said, well, the bees are in this hive, it's 4 boxes, and they just don't want to expand. I'm like, okay, that's odd. So all 4 boxes and the bees don't want to do anything? Well, you might have too many boxes on. She said, no. And so, okay, tell me what's going on in the hive. She said, well, they all have frames and there's stuff all through it. And the bees just don't want to do anything. Okay, that doesn't help me. Tell me what I'm looking at. She said, well, the bees are in the bottom box. Okay, now I'm learning something. And they're in the one corner, but they don't want to do anything. Okay, what is in that bottom box? And she said, well, it's all filled with frames of honey, and the bees are on one side. Well, why is the bottom box all filled with honey and the bees on the one side? She said she moved things all around, she combined hives, and she wanted to give them all this food. Well, she honey bound the queen. There was no place for her to lay. She couldn't go anywhere because it's all filled with honey. And so, in this case, an inspection would have been fantastic. But there's lots of things that are going on in your hive, but you have to kind of, there's times during the season that you don't want to get into the brood. You can take honey, but once the season is started and everything's going good, that brood chamber, you want to leave it alone because she's doing great. She had eggs at the beginning, they'll continue. So anyway, how can I fix it? Well, you've got to figure out what's going on and you've got to learn their language. Do your bees speak to you? They have a language, and that language is kind of like bee sign language. They communicate with scent, pheromones, movement, the waggle dances, temperature variations. They can communicate through that. Individual and group actions found in their work projects, appearance, location, everything. What is a honeybee? It's an insect superhero. That's how a child would love to learn about bees. Teach them about what that little bud can do, because it has so many gifts and so many skills that they've been given through nature that it's just fascinating to get into it. Those are some of them. If the club wants this, they can go through it, but these are all their little gifts that they've been given and what they can do with it. Each skill and ability helps the bees to some special skill or ability. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. So, my book. So what happened is I started coming up with all these characters that are inside the hive. And they were fascinating. They started actually having a personality. And I wondered if I was off base with some of it. And so I started working with Tammy Horn-Potter, which some of you might know as a writer, and Dr. Dewey Karen and Dr. Tom Seeley, to make sure that what I was teaching was right, because I thought I was pushing the mark. And they loved it. There were tiny edits, but they loved it. And so I ended up with this book filled with bees and activities inside the hive. And I came up with almost 100 of them. And these are things that you can identify and you can find, and to me, it made bees and the beehive an exciting little place to be. And so some of them, and we'll look at some of these, and they're in the book. If you don't want to buy it, you can still go through the book and look at them. Adopted workers and queens. Can worker bees be adopted into another hive? Can you take worker bees from one hive and put them into another hive? There's an adoption process. That if you follow the rules, you can. We'll get back into it. Attendants to the queen, baggage handlers, cell cappers, cell inspector, chemists, child care workers, disaster cleanup. You caused the disaster, just so you know. Dock workers, drone bees, festooning or scaffolding or chaining bees, fighting bugling bees, or they toot, they actually chirp. You can be walking around the hive and you can hear a chirp. That's a bugling queen. They're getting ready for battle. Foraging bees or field bees, gluer bee or propolis smearing, guard bee, military bee, there's tons. When I first started, we could only come up with 20. And I started coming up with all these, and these are all things that you can find in the hive, and there's a reason for every one of them. there's the adopted bee. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do with the book, if you read the main part of the book, you'll see these fun images, characters, but underneath them is a 1 to 2 line sentence that's bold. That's for a parent to read it to a child, and it's enough for the child to understand the image. And that's for young kids. The rest of what's on the page that is written is all the beekeeping terminology and biology stuff. All the terminology is there. I didn't shy away from terminology. It's all there. Festooning, proboscis, they're all there. And so adopted bee. Do we adopt queens? Do we take a queen from one place and put it into a new colony? We do it every year. It's very common. We do it with every package. It's just about to happen now, where these queens are introduced to a new colony, and if you follow the right rules, that it's typically 4 days without a queen, that queen will be accepted. And that's just the rule. If you do it for 2 days, they'll probably kill her. And so there's requirements. What about a worker bee? How do you take a worker bee from one colony and introduce it to another colony? So here's an example. You have a colony, a hive, it's doing great. But somebody calls you in the middle of summer and there's a swarm. A swarm in May is worth a load of hay, a swarm in June is worth a spoon, a silver spoon, a swarm in July isn't worth a fly. Is that true? No, it ain't actually. And so how do you take that swarm in July and make it worth more than a fly? Well, you can actually take that swarm and you can introduce it to your colony. If you put a separation board, it could be a propolis trap, it could be a window screen, it could be a spacer board with a window screen on both sides. Put it in there and put the one colony on top, the other colony underneath, and what happens is the pheromones go throughout the whole hive. And as long as those queens don't interact and fight, a colony is fine with each other. And then after a week, you can pull that screen out and you have all those bees that are together. One queen will then be killed, one will live, unless you have a honey wall that has formed in between the two. This example was years ago. I had a guy in Jackson Hole, Wyoming that wanted some of my mini frames with brood. He wanted a whole bunch, but he wanted 2 different colonies. And so I had a box that was half of this one. And what I did is I put a queen with her attendants over here. I put a frame of brood, then I put some honey frames, and then on this side, honey frames, brood, and the queen. And I put a screen on the top, and the screen on the bottom, and I put it into a box, and I mailed it off to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I was curious to see what was going to happen. And so a few days later, he wrote, he said, "Oh, the bees arrived." And I said, "Were the 2 queens in there?" He said, "Yeah." Were they alive? Because I thought initially that they were just going to fight it out and the whole thing would be dead. He said, "No, there was one on one side, one on the other side." So if you have a honey wall in between them where those queens can't go across and communicate, the bees will be fine. It's the queen that starts them fighting. So kind of interesting. So nurse bees, which are worker bees, can they be moved into other colonies? As freely as water. Nurse bees have no aggression. The other bees that are older know that they're young. You can move nurse bees anywhere you want. So if you have a brood frame and you want one colony to be stronger, you can take brood frames from one hive and move them to another hive to balance them out without any issues whatsoever. So that's the adoption process. So you can mix bees. You can do it quite a bit. There's lots of different reasons to do it, but If you were to get a swarm in July and you add a big ball to your hive, you just increased your workforce. Now here in July, everybody says July 1st your honey harvest is done. Well, no, if you have a time where it's really hot, you might need to feed them during that time, but you have another period coming after that hot period that is fantastic. So keep them going during the hot time, even if you have to feed them, so that you have a big colony when it's not. Otherwise, they're going to drop in numbers. So that's the adopted bee. Any questions about the adopted bee? Attendance to the queen. I'm going to go now into mine. Those of you that have a book, on page 20, there is a bee with a wheelbarrow, and on the front of the wheelbarrow is the royal excrement team. That queen never leaves the hive, typically. And so there's bees in there that have to clean up after her. And so there's a poo group that they clean up all that stuff, and it has to happen. So understand that one of the things that I'm trying to do in this book is I'm trying to teach kids that these bees have responsibilities and things in their home that they have to care for and they have to do, whether it's good or bad. They have to do it, just like we do in our homes. It could be a chore, but they have to do it. But in the hive, one of the things that's cool is it's an age-based society. So jobs are age-based. They progress from one job to another based on their age. So they're not infinitely stuck on taking care of the poop. They have other things that they're going to get to do later in life. The second section, so that was the first section. The second section on page 25 shows a nurse bee with her little gown and crosses and all that stuff like you would see in an old nurse show. And on the wall it's Ward B, which is kind of cute. Throughout the book, there's little things that Hugh Evans put into the images that are really funny and really kind of humorous. You just have to look for them. And so the nurse bee is one of the main parts of the hive. If you get into the very middle of the hive where the brood is, who's the rulers of a hive? Anybody want to stab at that? Who rules a colony? Is there a ruler?
Workers. Workers.
Sam's going to say workers.
Because they can replace the queen anytime they want to.
Any other thoughts?
But
I'm going to say the nurse bees, the youngest bees in the hive. And the reason is they're the ones that decide whether the queen lives, whether she dies. They're the ones that control everything. And once the worker bees get a little bit older, they then slowly move out from the center of the hive, and they get to the outside of the brood nest, and their jobs then move further and further away from that where the queen is. One of the funny things, when I used to do bee removals here in Utah, there was one house I remember down by the river where they had pumped tons of bottles of pesticide into this eaves trough where these bees were. And they couldn't understand, like, I think they had done almost 30 days, and every day there was like more bees than before. And it seemed like it wasn't even thinning out. And I said, well, but all you're killing are the foraging bees. The queen's still laying 2,000 eggs a day. And she's doing a better job than you killing them. And so once the bees are older, they're on the outside of the hive, or outside of the brood nest. They don't go back into where the queen is. And so you might kill them, but they're not taking the stuff in like a wasp and a hornet does. they're going to be dead and outside of the hive. So anyway, I ended up doing a really nice removal. The second section of my book, one of my favorites is on page 29. I used to always wonder, when you pull out a brood frame and it's all capped and you see individual cells that are open, why didn't they use those? Like, there's more so in Canada than there were here, but I know that there were here. So why do they have these open cells that they could have easily laid an egg in, easily had larvae and another bee come from? Why is it open? It's a heater cell. So what happens is when the bees are going through variations in temperature, where it gets warm and cold, a bee will go into that cell, do its wings and create body heat, and warm up the surrounding area, and that's called a heater bee. Now, this image is kind of fun because you have this bee holding up a fan, blowing, and 5 or 6 bees in little togas with hot dog sticks in little hot tubs. That's just cute, but kids will remember that. And they'll remember what's happening because of the image. And so that's a heater. And I think it turned out really, really good. Laying worker, page 33. How many people have experienced a laying worker issue in a hive? It's going to happen. It just seems like everybody that gives you advice on it, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Essentially, a laying worker is a bee that is identifying itself as the queen. That's what it is. And if it's allowed to continue doing what it's doing, that colony will fail. Now, how do you stop it? Well, there's people who will say take and shake and do all these different things. This is the simplest way to solve a laying worker hive. You have a hive that the queen is no longer there. She's been gone for more than 20 days. And because she's been gone for more than 20 days, worker bees have started laying eggs. And there's a whole bunch of those eggs in cells. So your first problem was that you weren't paying attention. Something happened. You could have injured that queen. It could have absconded or swarmed off, and you destroyed a whole bunch of queen cells. A side note, once a queen cell is capped, it's capped inside your hive. Wherever that queen cell is, that queen is gone. The queen that created that one is gone. So if you see capped queen cells inside your hive and you start killing them because you don't want your hive to swarm off, you just created all of the things that is going to cause a laying worker colony. So how do you fix it? Here's your laying worker hive. It's doing bad stuff. And if it's allowed to continue, you're going to end up with these small drones that are just going to consume honey out of all of your hives because they're allowed to go from hive to hive to hive to hive. So there's your hive. The laying workers have never left. They don't go foraging. They stay right here. The foragers go back and come here and go back and come back. And so during the middle of the day, like noon, 1 o'clock, you take this hive and you move it 15 to 20 feet over here. Those laying workers have no idea what you just did. But the foraging bees that are the good bees, the ones that were doing all the work, are going to come back to where they were. So you're going to put a hive here with some frames of brood, open brood so that they have stuff. You're going to have some nurse bees. All the field bees that are coming back with resources are coming back to here. This one here, for days, are going to send out all these worker bees to do this work, and they're going to come back there. After a number of days, this one here is just left with the laying workers and bees that are no good for you. So this one then take at night. When I tell people, oh, you can kill everything in here, people get mad at me. So tell me how much worse is this? take this 2 miles away next to Sam's place and shake them all out. Well, then he's overrun with laying workers, which can actually take over a colony, and drones in excess. So it's best to get rid of all of the laying workers and all the stuff that's there. You can still use the frames after they're dead. But this one now can become a productive colony. And it took no effort whatsoever. It was simple. If these laying workers get out of the hive and find it back to another hive, whether they drift or go somewhere else, they can seek out the queen and kill her. And then you have another colony that has laying workers. And you can just snowball it again and again. It's horrible. If you add a queen to the laying worker hive, the issue is unless she's caged on a frame, those laying workers will try and seek her out and kill her. And you'll just go through queen after queen after queen. So this way, you solved it. It's done. You have a colony that's growing. Once you know it's growing, it forms a queen cell. At that point, you know it's good. So you can wait for that queen cell to mature and go on a mating flight. Or you can then kill it and introduce a queen, because you know it's fine. That's how you solve a laying worker hive. And it's simple. Questions about that? That's the way I do it, and it works every time. My third section in the book is inside the hive, but outside of the brood nest. One of the first ones is, and it's on page 38, is a biomonitoring bee. What's that? Did you know that you guys have biomonitoring bees in your hives? Yeah, now you do. So when I was here, the USDA ARS up in Logan got a whole bunch of little hives. And what they did is they needed to test to see how the bees were doing in going out and bringing in pollen, and if that pollen that they were bringing in was going to be infected with chemicals. And so what happens is they can test the hive beforehand, and the bees can help the researchers determine whether things in our crops and orchards, if the stuff that they're using is bad enough to get back to the hive, and it can tell you if those bees are doing better or worse or the same as before. And so we have bees in our hives that actually are fantastic herbalists. They're fantastic environmentalists. They'll go out everywhere and do all sorts of things for you and your neighborhood, and you don't even know they're really doing it. You might think they're pollinating, but they're doing a whole bunch of stuff. And in the case of the biomonitoring bee, they're working with scientists today to help us know what is good for our bees and what's good for crops, where the two can live together. See, in Canada, where I'm from, we have crops as far as you can see forever and again and again and again and again. And we no longer have crops at home where you can go and have people clean out the weeds and walk, because it's literally the bottom third of our province is about the size of Utah, and those are all crops. You can't hand pick and pluck weeds. You have to use chemicals. You have to do stuff. And so we have to know how that's being affected with the bees. If it's hurting them, we have to change what we're doing. Now, one of the things is people in cities and even outside of cities, when you start spraying stuff, how often do you read the container before you start spraying? Now, for us, we're beekeepers, so typically we don't spray very much. But if it's dandelions, your neighbors are going to go spray again and again and again. Bees love dandelions. Now, in some cases, the pesticide is a herbicide, which doesn't affect the bees so much. But there's a lot of stuff that we use that are pesticides that are meant to kill bugs, and bees are one of them. And it could be used in mosquito abatement. It could be used on crops. Biomonitoring bee, Congress bee. Oh, we talked about that. Who rules the hive? Page 40. Thermal defense. There's a great one. We learned a number of years ago, not honeybees, but I'll come back to honeybees, that there are some bees that have learned how to fight back by creating heat to fight against the predator that's attacking them. Well, honeybees do that too. They can do that with wasps. They don't heat up a whole big hive, but they heat up and they basically attack the wasp and they shake their wings while they're around them. And they can create body heat in excess of what the wasp can handle, and the wasp dies and the bees can survive. Did you know that the bees can do that also with varroa mites? Varroa mites have a tolerance that is less than a honeybee, and a honeybee can raise up the temperature of a hive up to 20 degrees, and for about 8 minutes, it will kill every mite in the hive. So there's testing and studies that are being done where they're actually adding thermal heaters to hives to heat it up to kill mites. When I was in the East last year for the EAS conference, we had talked about it. The issue is if you heat it up too much like that, you can be killing also your brood. And so you have to decide if you're just doing it for 8 minutes, it's not a big deal. But if you're doing it for a long period of time, you could be destroying the whole young section of your hive, and that is bad. But bees have an ability to fight with creating body heat. That's fantastic. Prior to doing this, I didn't have a clue that we had bees that could do that sort of thing.
So what temperature do they go up to?
120, I believe. You know, when I was here, I was told that you couldn't have hives, colonies go really hot. But when I went to the Middle East, when they said that, you know, it can be 130, 140, and bees are flying, I was told that they can't, and they can, as long as they have a close water source. That actually opens the door for another thing that I used to teach here wrong. How far do you need to have your water source from your hive? How close, how far away should a water source be to your hive?
I heard 50 feet.
15 feet. I used to teach 15 or 20 feet.
I have one about 5 feet away from the front of my house.
I had one 4 feet last year, and I saw this colony I put over there going just like this, back and forth.
Yeah.
It blew me away. And in the Middle East, they have that too. And the farther they have to go during hot temperatures, the harder it is for them. But they can find water really close. How do you zone your bees on a water source? Because we're told that in spring, they find water sources, and you can't, once they find them, you can't redirect them to a place. If they're going to your neighbors and they don't like them in their pond or in their hot tub, how do you
Peppermint oil.
How?
You put peppermint oil in the water you don't want them to go to. They don't like it.
I use spearmint, but
Spearmint is fine.
instead of putting it in the water, put it on sticks or something that is floating around it, even on the bath around it, and you can redirect your bees to it by doing that incentive, because they smell it. They can smell it easy. And so we have had so many people that have had jet tubs and hot tubs and pools and ponds where beekeepers' bees are going and they hate it. Well, how do you get it so that they go a different direction to another source? Putting lemongrass oil, spearmint oil. The bees will find it really fast, and as long as you keep it hydrated, the bees will continue going to it. It's awesome. Water is vital. Here's another one. During the summer, if you don't have a water source close to your bees, what happens is it gets pretty hot. If it gets hot in the hive where they don't have water, we're told that if the humidity inside the hive goes below 20 or 80%, that you'll lose your brood. If it's at 60%, you'll lose all of your brood. They'll all fail. Yet I see bees out in farmers' field with no sign of any water source anywhere near. Now, the issue is if you go through a brood failure because of water, if you go through 2 brood failures during the summer, your colony is dead. Done. That's how vital water is for your hive. And so there is a water bee. It's, I don't remember the page, but it's on the foraging bees, and it's pink one at the end. 88. Fourth section is outside the hive. One of them is on page 71, and it's bee lining. How do bees navigate? I have 2 images on the page. I started off where the bee was holding a compass, and I had it changed to a sextant. It's not quite a sextant, but it's closer than a compass. Bees don't use a compass. No, none of that. But they do look at things. Could be color, it could be poles, it could be trees, and that's how they find their way back and forth. And so that's why beekeepers have hives that could be different colors, because bees will identify that and come back. The more obstacles that are up, they'll be able to find that to find their way back home. Bee lining. One of the things here in Utah that I did was bee removals, and regularly I would get calls. Could be that pond, it could be that pool, it could be all sorts of things where people say, there's bees coming here and I don't know where they're coming from. How does it work? A bee goes out and it forages. Once it collects its water, its nectar, its resins, its pollen, it goes straight home. And it's referred to as a bee line. And that bee line, they somehow find their way amongst all the stuff that they've done to go a straight line from where they were all the way back home. So if you're trying to find a colony, you can put out water sources, have the bees come, see which way they're leaving after they're full, and that's telling you the direction of where that colony is. And so you can put up others, and you can eventually find where that hive is. It could be in a house, it could be in a roof, it could be in a wall, it could be in a floor, it could be anywhere. And then it's one that, in my case, I could put up swarm traps and let them repopulate it again and again and again. Or I could do a cut and removal. So bee lining is pretty cool. Another one is on page 84, and it's a scavenger bee. Do we have scavenger bees? One day I was called up in Salt Lake to go to Lagoon. Lagoon got shut down by the health department. Why? They had too many bees in the park. Where are they coming from? And so I got to walk through the park during a beautiful, nice, hot day, and I got to look at bees, and I saw bees going from one garbage can to another garbage can to another garbage can. And the first thing I said is, you need to have lids on your garbage cans. And they said, it's $130,000 for us to put lids on all of the garbage cans. Well, they have to. Okay. Well, I ended up finding them. They were in this tree. It was by the water park. And we came back at dusk to open them up and remove them. The first honey that I found inside the hive, I tasted it all. I love tasting stuff that's in the hive. The first stuff was red. Well, what was it? I tasted it. It was tiger blood snow cone. It was awesome. Well, I went further, and then the drones were red. They actually were a distinct red color from eating those that snow cone honey. As I went further into the hive, the next thing I saw, it was black honey. Well, we're talking black, black, black. I was a little bit hesitant to even taste it. Coca-Cola.
Oh.
And so I kept little jars, and I call it Lagoon honey. Now here in Utah, you're not supposed to be able to say you have honey if it didn't come from plants. Well, anybody that has their bees around Lagoon I can tell you that they're stealing and recycling all the stuff that we throw away. I went to Washington, D.C. a number of years ago, and I was standing not far from the monument. Here's the monument, here's the White House, and I'm standing on a corner, and people had thrown all of their cups and stuff into these baskets that are just garbage baskets on the side of the road. And I was looking at it, and I actually took pictures. There were bees taking all the stuff out of these cups. So they will recycle. They want the sugars.
I have a question. I had some blue honey in my hive. Was it antifreeze?
No, the antifreeze is green, but not all green is antifreeze. 2 stories. One, I got called to go up to Woodland. There was a cabin up there, and he claimed he had bees in the cedar. And I went up. He sent me pictures. You could see it streaking. I was pretty positive that there was going to be honey and bees in there, and that it probably died, and the honey is now being robbed, and it's leaking all over the place. I get up there, and wherever the exit is from where the bees are leaving the house, you'll find dead. So you can either propolis or dead, you'll find something. Little side note really quick, if you go to the train station downtown, I was just there a couple days ago, if you go on the south corner, it's on the west, look all the way up onto the top of the marble, you'll see a little pinhole, and all around that pinhole is propolis. There's a bee colony there that I was shown years ago that it was clean then, and now it's dirty, dirty. Bees will let you know where they're living. And so, basically, I went to this place thinking I would find where all their debris was. Propolis or something. Nothing. I couldn't figure it out. And so I'm looking at this stuff. You can see it was dripping on the inside of the window ledge. So I just said, it looked like honey. It was blackish because it was hitting the cedar. So I tasted it. It was sweet. And then I looked up at the scene and I realized they had inside sprinklers inside this building. And so all those lines are filled with antifreeze so that they don't freeze in the wintertime. And so it turned out that he would not have got insurance to cover the damage if it was honeybees, but because it was his antifreeze pipes that keep his house warm, because they were leaking, insurance paid for all of the repair. So antifreeze, bees will collect it. It is green, but not all of it. There is natural green.
Is it poisonous to them?
Antifreeze is poisonous to us.
To them?
To the bees.
No, they bring it in. I don't know. I've seen it, and the bees seem to have been fine with it. They put it into their honey gut. They took it back to the hive. I would think in the wintertime, if they're trying to eat that, it would be really a bad thing.
Yeah, because I had a whole hive die, and it had greenish blue honey in it.
Yeah, the blue, here in Utah back about 10 years ago, we had that red honey scare.
Yeah.
Where everybody, we have this stuff that's toxic, it's bad for man, it's going to kill you. But everybody seemed to say that the honey tasted different. Some were saying that it tasted like this, some were saying that it was bitter, some were saying, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And in Salt Lake, my place was one of the places that was determined that everybody that had red honey would bring it to us, and another beekeeper would come and replace it with good honey. Well, it turned out that up in Alpine, there's a candy place, that they were getting all this candy, and they were putting it in these huge paint vats, liquefying it, and then open yard feeding, which is actually a wrong thing to do. You're creating robbing frenzies, and you're feeding bees. Giving sugar freely like that now is considered a health risk to bees. It takes them away from what they're supposed to do, and they're then doing stuff that they're not supposed to do, collecting whether it be Coca-Cola, liquid candy cane, which could be all different colors. And in this case, because the candy canes that were melted down, Some were sour apple, some were pina colada. They varied. And so that's why everybody had different flavored stuff. And so everything that was brought in, initially I was thinking of taking it and listing it for Halloween honey, or because it was all red. But we ended up making mead out of it. And we had a mead class, and it was great. And it worked fantastic. Blue honey, blue and red honey. If you go on the internet and type it in, there's a number of places around the world that have had candy cane plants that have discarded stuff. Bees have found it, and it ended up finding its way into its hive. So that's kind of also biomonitoring bee. But the fifth section of the book are bees, or drones. And initially, the first one that I did was a drone that was sitting on a sofa, eating pizza, had a remote control, having popcorn in toga, waiting for its chance to mate. And when Dewey Karen saw that, he said, it's a great picture, but drones are more important than that. There's more to do with drones than that. For us, we typically look at drones and we think because they don't do much for us, that we're willing to cull them and destroy them. The varroa mites like to incubate with them, so our first thought is to destroy them. But those drones are vital for your hive, they're vital for the community. There's drone congregation areas all over the place that they use year after year after year, and when your colony fails and they have to requeen, those queens are led back to that drone congregation area to mate. And we need them. They share DNA, they do all sorts of stuff. So one of my images on page, it's a food bagger on page 96. I want to do this as a t-shirt. It's a little, you know, the guys that are sitting on the corners with their little signs saying that they want money for, I don't know, smokes or meth or food or whatever it might be. This one is holding a little sign and it says, "We'll mate for food." That needs to be a father's t-shirt for Father's Day. "We'll mate for food." I love it. That's cute. And so the last section of the book, there's a whole bunch of drone ones. The last section of the book is about famous bees. One of them is a fossilized bee. The oldest bee in North America was found in the Nevada Shale about 40 million years ago. So we did have honeybees here at one point. It's not the honeybee that we have now, but there were honeybees here. But something happened back then in an island, whether it was a volcano or whatever, we don't know. And so that one's in there. There's another one. It's a pilgrim bee on a ship. And the ship, instead of it being a Mayflower, which you would think that it would be the one I choose, it's the Discovery. Because that's the one that we know for sure that bees came from Europe to here. So that's how the European honeybee arrived in America. And so there's even a Garden of Eden bee. They had to have pollinators. They had fruit. So there's a whole bunch of fun things throughout the book. I tried to incorporate things from history in there. So such as a balling bee, we just think of bees killing their queen. Well, in history, that's just like Caesar in Rome. So here we have a queen on the steps of the Senate in Rome with a whole bunch of daggers, and that's the nurse bees killing their queen. And so I incorporate historical things in. There's another one of what's it called? Long time ago in the Bible, there was a group of people that wanted to invade, and they created that horse. Trojan. But instead of using a horse, we did a wooden bee. And inside that, what's happening is these bees are being presented to a hive. The Africanized bees, what they do is, instead of the old queen leaving, it sends off young queens with a small little group of bees. They hang around the front of the hive. They just ball up around the front of the hive, and they stay there long enough to take on the pheromones of that hive. Once they have the pheromones of that hive, those Africanized bees invade the hive, they seek out the queen and kill her. Once they kill her, they come back outside and introduce their queen that they had on the front, and then all of a sudden your colony is very aggressive, and you wonder why. That's really cool. It's bees have learned all these fantastic little defenses and strategies, and we might miss it if all we're doing is standing there looking and wanting honey. The hives are way more than honey. They're fascinating little places, and so that's what my book is kind of about. There's almost 100 of those, and each one of those, there's a paragraph beside it that is fascinating and very simple. It's not one where you're going to fall asleep reading. You'll enjoy it. It's written simply. So that's kind of the book. And I guess the last thing is publishing. When I first started this, I wondered how I would do it and how do you publish? So if you decide to write a book, up until now, I always thought you had to go out and pay for X amount of books to be printed. And you're forking out thousands of dollars, and then you have these books that you then have to somehow peddle off, and you don't know if people are even going to want it. And so what I found in Canada, this company is Friesen Press. It's the largest printing company. You come up with whatever it is you want to write, and they help you lay it out, they help you organize it, they help you edit it, and in the end, they'll print it. You get to keep all the rights. But in this case, they also had connections with Ingram Book, which is the largest book distributor out of the United States. And so they have posted it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Ingram and all the different places, so that now I don't have to print nothing. It's all printed on demand. You can go to Amazon, it's there, just not without my signature if that matters. But that way now you can print and write any books that you want, and you can have them published and you can have them posted to Amazon, and you make royalties for that forever. And so publishing isn't what it used to be. If you have a thought that somebody would benefit from, a skill, something that you could teach, you can put it together into a book and you can have it published. You determine the value of what the cost is going to be. You determine what royalty you're going to get. And you have a book that's done.
What was it called again?
The place that I used was Friesen Press out of Canada. It's a self-publishing publisher. See, the problem is that there's a lot of publishing companies that you could show your book to. They'll buy your book, they'll give you a little bit, and then they own it. Well, I didn't want anybody else to own it. And I really didn't want a big company to produce it. I wanted it so that it would go into home schools and everywhere. And so with these two, I now have it in England, it's in Australia, it's all across the US and Canada, and any other place that can print books on demand. So India, Pakistan, and I don't have to do anything. I can market it more, but they're going to distribute and do all that stuff. So printing it has become way easier than it's ever been. So if you have a little niche, whether it's beekeeping or whether it's a different little thing, apitherapy, you can write stuff and you can produce it and you can publish it, and you don't have to print them online. And you can have them posted, and you can just wait and see what comes. So publishing has become a totally different egg.
So I've never been able to find the answer. How does a queen swarm?
Say that again.
How does a queen swarm when she's so big she's not able to fly?
No, there's another one in my book,
I was saying,
and it's really a funny one. I almost thought that it would be pulled out of my book. but it was left because my intentions were all right. It's on page. Vibrating the queen bee. So this shows a queen bee on an exercise machine with that vibrator around her waist. And what happens is when the bees know that they're going to swarm, they poke and vibrate her and buzz her to lose weight. So they keep her moving. And what has to happen is because that queen has been in the hive, she's been laying eggs constantly, she's really out of flying shape. They have to get her back into shape before they swarm. And so what happens is they keep buzzing her and keep her moving, and they slow down the amount that she's eating. She's put on a diet with exercise. It's awesome. But let's say that you have a different thing that happens. You have bees that abscond. Well, they haven't prepared that queen. So now you're going to see a swarm ball, but it's not going to be way up anywhere. It's going to be down on the ground. It's going to be on a low branch or at the bottom of a tree because that queen can't fly. She wasn't prepared for that trip. They absconded for whatever reason. It could have been mice. It could have been robbers. It could be whatever. And so there's two issues. One is that she's prepared, and the other one she's not. It's kind of cool. So that's the vibrating the queen bee. And then on this page is the Trojan horse bee, where they have the bees inside. That was the Africanized bees.
Does
So
the queen always
this is kind of fun.
when she's in the mating flight, the queen hatches, and the other queen has swarmed, so she's gone. So the new queen hatches. She goes out to mate. She always goes back to her hive, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, unless you have too many hives too close, and so then she can drift. And so she might come back to the neighboring hive that is a foot or two away, and she might be mated, but she's not the pheromone scent of that hive, and so they would kill her. And so then you're thinking, well, she died in mating. Well, no, she drifted and she was killed.
So your
So
hives shouldn't be too close together?
in nature, they wouldn't be. And so any apiary where bees are just right next to each other, you have drifting, where bees will drift from one hive to another. That's another reason why I can prove that you can have foraging bees accepted by other colonies, because drifting happens all the time. And I have a drifter bee in the book so that you can see what the drifter bee is. But they will migrate and go elsewhere. But a queen won't mate and go back to a hive that's a block away. She's coming right back to where she came from. Unless she gets eaten by a bird or something else in blue.
How far apart should they be?
If you talk to Tom Seeley, I'm not going to answer that. But if you talk to Tom Seeley, he's going to say that colonies are natural 15 feet up a tree, and they're at least 40 feet apart. Commercial beekeeping, we don't do that. We might have a hive, a pallet, and instead of having two going opposite directions, yeah, this one going this direction, this one going that direction, that one going that. And so it's harder for them to drift because their entrance is a different location. But when we have a big long row of hives, you'll have drift. You'll have drift of bees, you'll have drifting of queens.
But if you have them different colors, is
That helps them immensely because they can identify and see that. Yeah, and so any markings, you can, or anything, you can have a plant next to this one, a different plant next to that one. They see that. That's the navigation thing that we were talking about earlier, the sex thing.
So I'm getting into my hives tomorrow.
Yay!
Yay. So always going with a purpose. The one thing I want to know is whether I'm going to split. What should I
So
be looking for?
when you open your lid of your hive, you're going to have typically 2 boxes, but it might be 1 box, however it was you went through winter. When you open that lid, bees are going to be in that top section. And you're going to look in between the frames, that space. You're not looking at the top of the frame. You're going to think you are, but you're not. You're looking at the space in between the frames. If you open that lid and all of those spaces in between all of those frames are just booming with bees, you're going to be doing a split. If you open it and there's only 5 of those gaps filled, they have room to grow. Before you add a box, there should be about 7 of those gaps filled with bees. So we have the misconception in beekeeping that we add a box once 7 frames are full. No, 7 gaps on the top of the hives full, because those are just bees watching out. There's a whole bunch of bees underneath. Once the 7 gaps are filled up on top, you should put another hive on. If it's a Saskatraz bee, that's from where I'm from. They actually originated, they were created about 5 minutes away from Saskatoon by another guy named Albert. And they're winter hardy, but they're also aggressive. They're a Carnolian based. So if you wait too much longer than that 7, and you're waiting into the 8th, they're already planning to swarm, because that's the way they are. So depending on the bee you have, if it's an Italian, 7 frames are good, add another box. Carnolian, 7 frames, you make sure you get something on really fast. You might even check to make sure you don't have queen cells.
So
Because
are you
that's
gonna
the-
check for the queen cells? I mean,
If it's a Carnolian and you're over 7 frames full, they could have already been planning the swarm. If you open it up and you see queen cells and they're not capped, that means that queen is still in there. She's not going to leave until she knows that they're incubating. And so you're not going to destroy those until you know that you're good. There's some cases where we've opened hives where they've had 20, 30 queen cells. Well, you know, leave 1 frame of queen cells in there and take the others and start a nuke so that you're covered. If something happened and this queen doesn't work out, you still have ones that are coming. And there are little jester cups and different things that you can put on the bottom of your queen cells, so when they come out, they're caged immediately. Because typically the first queen that comes out is going to kill all the other ones before they come out. And just so you know, the reason you know that, if a queen emerges, it comes out of a perfect circle. If there's a hole in the side, it's been killed by another queen. So that's how you know what's going on. And that's, could be reading a frame, or do you speak bee? And so all this stuff is in the book. It's really cool. But I've made it simple. And any other questions?
I'm new to beekeeping. Do you have any advice?
Congratulations.
I'm getting my hive on the 27th. But do you have any advice?
Advice? The first piece of advice I would give is that you should have a mentor. The mentor doesn't have to be somebody that comes to your place. It can be somebody that you have access to a phone, because what's going to happen is you're going to have issues that you might not have time to go to a book and find out what's going on, but you can take a photo of it and send it to your mentor and say, is this bad? You're not going to send them every single thing that you're going through, but if you see something that's odd, there's a whole 1,000 ants going into my hive. Take a picture, send it, and he'll tell you what to do, because there's stuff you can do to stop that. Funny story with that. One of the answers is putting cinnamon around your hive. Ants don't like cinnamon. You can do water, you can do vinegars, other different things, but ants don't like cinnamon. My nephew went home to help. One day he comes into the garage and he says, how do you get rid of ants? I said, you know, one of the ways to get rid of ants with beekeeping is we just dust cinnamon around the hive and ants won't go across it. And okay, he left, and no big deal. Well, about a week later, I went into his kitchen, and there was cinnamon on his window ledge. It was all over the floor. He had it on some of the fridge shelves. I guess he had an issue with ants. But if they're in your house, you're not going to use cinnamon. Cinnamon does work really good though. But having a mentor, that is someone that is close to where you're at, because he'll understand the issues that you're going to have, whether it be summer drought, whether it be the length of your winter and how to feed them during winter, when to inspect them, what to look for. If something goes wrong in your colony and you only have one, I'm of the belief that you don't need more than one, but you need to have a mentor. A lot of people teach that you have to have two, and a lot of times they're told that they have to have two, but they're not told why they need to have two. And so they think that they're just looking at each other, seeing how they're differing. No, the issue is if one is doing good and one's doing poor, you can take stuff from one hive and equalize it. You can even swap positions of the hive so that the field bees from the strong hive are helping and going into the weak colony. It's really awesome. But if you have just one hive and something goes wrong, you can get a frame of eggs and brood or a queen from your friend or whatever it is, and you can save and rescue your hive before it's dead. You can do that walk-away thing that I was showing with laying workers, but if you don't have a mentor, you're trying to learn everything out of the gate by yourself. I've been doing this for about 25 plus years, and every year I'm learning more stuff. And so to try and do it all by yourself, that's why most beekeepers are beekeepers for 2 to 3 years and they quit. Because there's so many things thrown at you every year that is different. Here's another one. I saw a video and it was incredible. This guy was videotaping it from the back of his house, and his colonies, about 6 of them, were in the back of the yard, and the neighbor over the 6-foot fence was spraying stuff. Well, he didn't want the bees over there. And so, like, dang. And so this guy is losing his colonies, and he didn't know why. I was in Draper. I had about 45 hives on one street, right on the other side of the mountain. And I went and looked at them. It was the beginning of the hot time, but they were all booming, just doing fantastic. And 2 weeks later, I came back. I didn't open them. They just were doing really good. And so 2 weeks later, I came back, and every hive on that street was dead. Bees everywhere, dead. Well, that's basically D-Day. That was Normandy Beach. They were slaughtered by some chemical somewhere. If you have bees dead all over the front of your hive, in the area around your hive, that was a mass destruction caused by a chemical. And so I didn't know what happened. I had no idea. So just about the time I went to move, a lady that was in our neighborhood wanted to know if she could come and take a whole bunch of my raspberries. I had 600 raspberry canes. And so every day I'd come home and she's digging up these canes. Well, at about the 3rd day, I went to talk to her and she said, you know, Al, I gotta come clean. And she walks away. I don't know what she's talking about. And she said, you know the bees you used to have in my yard? And I said, yeah. She said, I think I was the one that killed them. I said, well, how did you do that? She said, do you remember all those zucchini plants in our backyard? She had about a ½ acre of zucchini plants. I don't know why you would have that many zucchini plants. You can't give that many zucchini away. But they were trying to learn gardening because they just bought this place. And she went and looked at all these zucchini flowers, and they had bugs on them, on the flowers. And she thought that that must be bad. Okay, these bugs must be collecting something without her permission. So she went to the local lumber store into the aisle that is all bad and asked the guy, how do you get rid of bugs that are on our flowers? Somehow that guy told her to dust 7 on all of those flowers. What do zucchini blossoms do? They produce pollen. Pollen is what keeps your babies growing and your queen alive. And so every one of those flowers in her whole backyard at the beginning of summer, when it's the worst time for them, they need food, she basically wiped out every one of my colonies by dusting it with 7. But seeing all those bees up front, that's how I knew it was that event. I just didn't know who did it. But you won't know, because it could be anywhere in your neighborhood. Somebody not following the directions. But why would you do that? The flower needs pollination. They need the bug on there. He didn't know any better, and the guy that told her, well, I clearly didn't know any better. And so having a mentor is key. It's vital. And that's what this group is.
We're trying to line up, we've got like 5 people that are mentors, that is their board position, and so we are in the process of lining that up. Are you on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're a member of UCBA, I will put something out on Facebook for people to PM me so that we can start getting people matched up for mentors.
I wrote an article about mentoring, and one of the things that is really vital is the mentor doesn't do your job.
Right.
He guides you, he counsels you, but it's your job to keep those bees alive. If they don't stay alive, it's not his fault. It's still yours. And just know that you're going to kill colony after colony after colony, swarm after swarm after swarm, and you have to get past it. And you love them. I love my bees because, again, I love raising the bees. And it rips my heart every time I wipe out a colony. And there's times that I do it inadvertently. A couple of years ago, I had a guy that had about 40 boxes of canola honey that had crystallized in a frame. I had tons of it. And he couldn't harvest it because he couldn't spit it out. It crystallized 2 weeks. And I thought, hey, I'll add these boxes to my hives in fall. Regular supers in the industry that are worn, you'll have gaps and holes all over the place. Well, by the next day that I got to my apiary, I had robbing going on that was beyond belief. And it was because all this honey was unpatrolled. And I had holes everywhere for all the wasps and hornets and neighborhood bees to come and steal. And I created a robbing frenzy that was like nothing you've ever seen before. And here I'm an experienced beekeeper. I felt embarrassed. And in the end, I didn't want to use any of the boxes because I couldn't guarantee that things couldn't get in, even if I taped them. And so I scraped everything out of those. I put them all into buckets. My little trick, okay, is all crystallized honey and wax. I put battery blankets. Just a battery blanket at the bottom of the bucket, plug it in overnight. It was all liquid. It was awesome. And so I ended up with a whole bunch of stuff. But without a mentor, all those tricks, when I go around the world, and mostly around the US and Canada, the old timers, I love talking to them because they all have these fantastic little tricks to do this or to do that that I wouldn't know if I didn't ask. And so the mentors are the ones that know that type of stuff. So, any other questions? I could give you stories forever. But the book has a lot of them. That one that I told you, I got to share it with everybody so you know. My sister lives in North Salt Lake. And Dave, you'll get a kick out of this, buddy. One day I found out from my sister that my brother brought comb honey for her. She had never had comb honey and wanted to know what it was going to taste like. Well, okay. I kind of felt bad because I'm the one that produces comb honey. And my brother beat me to it. And I kind of felt bad. And so I asked her, okay, so how was it? It should have been me, but how was it? He said, well, it was really juicy. Juicy. And so then she said, yeah, later in the week there were bees inside my house. Well, he didn't give her a frame of capped honey. It was a frame of capped larva. That's the only thing I know of that's capped and juicy in the hive. And so I laughed so hard. To this day, I've never asked her, so what did it taste like? I don't know.
Protein.
So you need to know what's going on in the hive. And so that, again, is my book. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. will be out in the lobby. We've got books out there if you're interested in it. The people who did sign up for oil will be out there, Jen, if you can show them our Venmo out there. So if you have any questions, come meet them. Thank you so much again for coming.